and welcome live from Studio 7 at the CNN Centre. I'm Lynda Kinkade.
And I'm Michael Holmes. Coming up on this edition of CNN Today, one step closer. Theresa May clears one big hurdle, but an uphill battle on Brexit remains.
White House turmoil. Donald Trump is reportedly in a fury with a major shake-up looming.
And California burning, the scale and scope of the devastation difficult to comprehend.
The UK's future outside the European Union just took a big step forward as British Prime Minister Theresa May's cabinet okayed a draft Brexit agreement.
The European Commission releasing the text of that deal, among other details. It outlines a fallback solution for the Irish border, one of the most heated topics during the talks. Mrs May's deal, though, a long way from a final okay.
The Prime Minister and the EU's chief negotiator are insisting that it won't get any better than this.
The choice before us is clear. This deal, which delivers on the vote of the referendum, which brings back control of our money, laws and borders, ends free movement, protects jobs, security and our union, or leave with no deal or no Brexit at all.
This agreement is a decisive, crucial step in concluding these negotiations. It's also the achievement of a methodology, which has been negotiation carried out in transparency from the word go, and fully in the respective mandates.
And for what to take away from the busy day, Bianca Nobilo is in London, right outside number 10 Downing Street. So a big victory for the Prime Minister, getting it through Cabinet, but she's got Parliament to go and she does not have a majority there. What is the road ahead?
Yes, Michael, it seems like one big step for the Prime Minister and one small step for Brexit. There is an incredibly perilous road ahead for the Prime Minister. Now, she said today that Cabinet did agree on this draft Brexit text, but the language was interesting. It's clear that the Cabinet did not unanimously agree on the Brexit text, and though there's been no resignations as of yet, we're definitely still on resignation watch. A couple of government sources reminded me that when Theresa May initially proposed her so-called Chequers plan, that was the first iteration of her idea for Brexit, she gave a statement afterwards saying that everyone had agreed and that her cabinet were on side. And then what happened? The Brexit Secretary, David Davis, and the former Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, both resigned the next week. So by no means should she be taking a real sigh of relief at this point, because things could still get very difficult for her. And that's a point that she recognised herself on the steps of Downing Street today when she gave that speech.
And of course, Bianca, I don't imagine you've had a chance to read through this 585-page document just yet.
Of course she has. She's had it for an hour.
Michael knows me well, yes.
But there is, of course, the key point about the border, whether it will be a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. What does it say about that?
Well, you both point out the length of this document. Yes, 585 pages in that very dense legal language. But I did skip right to the part about Northern Ireland and the backstop, because that was the issue that was holding up these negotiations for many, many months. And it's the issue that really divides the Cabinet and Parliament in this country, not to mention the nation too. So what this draft text tells us is that in the event that a hard border in the island of Ireland can't be avoided through some form of comprehensive trade deal struck during the transition period, then the entire of the UK will remain in a customs union. Now, that's far too soft of a Brexit for many of the Brexiteers in May's cabinet and her party, so they're likely to vote this down when it comes to Parliament. Another aspect which is included in this draft legal text is the fact that Northern Ireland would also continue to abide by single market regulations. That's something which the Democratic Unionist Party, which props up Theresa May's government here in the UK, will not be likely to agree to either. So they're also looking like they will vote against this when it comes to Parliament. So Theresa May is in a very difficult position. The parliamentary arithmetic of the Prime Minister being able to get this deal through Parliament is looking very unlikely.
So Bianca, the Prime Minister's wording was interesting at number 10. She said the alternative is to leave with no deal or no Brexit at all. Interesting wording, no Brexit at all. So if it does get voted down in Parliament, what then? Is there room for another vote?
That's hugely significant wording, Michael, and you're right to point that out, because that has been Theresa May's negotiating strategy internally throughout. She's tried to scare the Remainers by threatening them that if they don't get on board with her deal, that they could risk seeing a no-deal Brexit, which would be the worst of all worlds for them. Similarly, she's tried to persuade the Brexiteers that if they don't go with what she's proposing, that they could risk no Brexit at all, because if Theresa May's plan doesn't go through, then all bets are off. There might be a second referendum. Nobody knows at this point in the UK. So there is so much at stake for the Prime Minister. But if this deal does go to Parliament and is voted down by the House of Commons, there are a couple of options. The House of Commons could instruct the government to go back to the EU and renegotiate the deal, but we don't know whether or not the EU would be willing to do that. And let's all remind ourselves as well of the timescale of this. Brexit is happening, it's enshrined in law for the 29th of March 2019. Time is running out, so whether or not the government would be able to return to the EU and try and negotiate, it just doesn't seem likely that they'll have time to do that. There is, of course, the other option of extending Article 50 and this Brexit process, but I find it very difficult to see that many in May's cabinet would be able to support that.
The other question when it comes to a vote is whether there could be a vote on this draft agreement, because there are so many that argue when the Brexit referendum happened, people were only given a yes or no option. They didn't know what this would entail, and the opposition, of course, say that this should be taken to the people for a vote. What's the likelihood of that this actual draft agreement will get a final say from the people of Britain?
That is a very active question. Now, one of the things that's problematising this entire process is the fact that the Brexit divisions are not divided across party lines. You mentioned there that the Labour Party has supported a people's vote or a second referendum, but not all of them do. Similarly, there are members of Theresa May's party who would like to see a public vote, and many who absolutely don't. But the People's Vote campaign in the UK, who'd like to see a vote on Theresa May's ultimate deal, are ramping up their activities, and they'll continue to do so, so long as they think it could be a possibility. But even the question of another vote, taking another vote to the people, is a complicated one, because not to get too bogged down in the details, but that requires a lot of parliamentary legislation to even get a referendum on the table and planned in the UK. So if they were going to do that, Lynda, if they were going to have another people's vote, they would have to extend that Article 50 process and push the deadline of Brexit back, which is something I'm not sure many people would support. And then finally, there is the question of what the options would be on any form of referendum. Would it be no deal or Theresa May's deal? Would it be no deal or remain? Would it be no deal or return to the EU and renegotiate? All questions which nobody has the answers to. So Brexit remains very complicated and very messy here in the UK, but Theresa May has taken a step forward, and this deal is closer to becoming a reality.
Nothing like a smooth process.
Exactly.
Couldn't be more complicated. And Bianca Nobilo will have read it, I guarantee you. Yeah.
485 pages.
Yeah.
Give me time, I will, yes.
You will, you will.
Thank you so much, Bianca.
She is a detail person.
She is, that is true.
All right, as Bianca was saying, and we have to say, there is still a very long road ahead before this deal is formally reached.
Absolutely. The draft agreement has to be approved by the EU Council. The 27 other countries in the Union will be convened for an extraordinary summit and have their say. And then after that, the deal will be voted on by the British Parliament, where Theresa May does not command a majority.
But if British lawmakers approve, and that's a pretty big but, the European Parliament would then have to give its OK. Now, whatever happens, Britain, as Bianca was saying, is set to leave the European Union March 29 next year. That is the law.